All right, so we're at another episode of Art and Coffee, and I thought I'd take a look at this article from Art News, and it's about the Royal Monastery of Santa Maria de. I think it's either Siena. Um, I think it's Siena. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was a pretty interesting article. So, just for like my personal records and for anyone who's interested in following along, I thought I'd take a look at this article and also just try and give myself some background context about what's going on. So, it reads here that it's really interesting. So after more than a decade of legal battles, Spain's Supreme Court ruled that a set of 13th century Romanesque murals removed from the Sijena Monastery during the Spanish Civil War and housed since in the National Art Museum of Catalonia, or MNAC for short, must be returned to their original home in Aragon. I guess Aragon is where the Sijena Monastery is located. So, it reads here that the decision is hailed as a victory by the Aragonese government, but experts warn it could come at a steep cultural cost, with MNAC filing a document that requires further study of the fragility of the work. I think some of the contention was that when the mural, parts of the mural were removed, some were moved in around the 30s or the 1930s, and the other parts were moved at a later time as well. So the murals removed in 1936 after a fire gutted the chapter house of the monastery are considered fragile even by conservation standards. Mounted on stretchers and partially reconstructed, they've been preserved in climate controlled conditions at the MNAC. Moving them now, Catalan officials and museum conservators argue, could cause irreversible damage. The latest ruling dismisses past agreements that the Catalan government claimed legitimized its custody of the works, finding that the original owners, the Siena religious order, never ceded ownership, and that no valid transfer of title occurred. Well, that's really, that's complicated. It's a complicated problem. The court's decision caps years of jurisdictional wrangling between Aragon and Catalonia. But while the legal question of ownership is settled, the practical matter of enforcement is far from resolved. MNAC officials insisted that the murals cannot be moved safely without a comprehensive collaborative conservation plan, one that assesses environmental risks, transport logistics, and the condition of the Siena site itself. Quote, a comprehensive view of the conservation project requires taking into account that the stages of diagnosis, risk assessment, and management, preparation of the work, dismantling, packaging, and transport are related to the subsequent installation at the destination. MNAC's court document reads according to El Pais. I don't know how that's pronounced. some compromise may be in the works. The museum has proposed a phased approach, suggesting that less delicate works removed in the 1960s could be returned first. But the fate of the central frescoes remains in limbo, suspended between legal certainty and physical fragility. Well, that's kind of a, I don't know, like, it just, this is my first introduction to what's happening here, and it's interesting to look at this photograph of the interior, at least a portion of the interior of the monastery, because it kind of looks like this could have been like parts of the original fresco. And same thing like here and here as well. So, but yeah, I mean, it's tricky because if things get moved and I don't know, they fall apart or break or the damage becomes too much. Yeah, I wonder where the stopping point is for things like that, where it's like, something is damaged. Like, when does it get to the point where it's not worth moving from one location to another? And is that even a possibility? Is the principle of moving something to a previous place or position I don't know. Is there a point where it's just not safe to do so? I don't know. I had this other. It was just a Wikipedia link that I have as well, and I was just taking a look at the monastery itself, just to kind of understand a little bit of information about the monastery. I know Wikipedia is not the most reliable source, but it is a good introduction, and I myself am just being introduced to this particular story, so I thought it would be good to just sort of browse and see what's going on. So, the Royal Monastery of Santa Maria in Siena is a convent in Villanueva de Siena, region of Aragon, Spain, built between 1183 and 1208. A Romanesque church was founded by this person, this lady, the wife of Alfonso II of Aragon. The convent church is based on the shape of the Latin cross. It is it has a single nave, a wide transept, and 3 apse chapels. There are also elements of Cistercian and Mudéjar architecture, such as in the roofs and windows. The main entrance portal features 14 archivolts. So those are these. What are transepts? Okay, well, that's interesting. The convent was operated by the Order of St. John of Jerusalem. It flourished in the 14th century thanks to royal transport, but declined after the Crown of Aragon merged with Castile. Several royal burials were made in the convent church, including Sancha of Castile, Queen of Aragon, who lived out her last years and died there after being marginalized by her son Pedro II of Aragon, who is also interred there along with 2 of his sisters. In 1835, after the ecclesiastical confiscations of Mendizabal deprived it of most of its revenues. The convent was abandoned by its religious community, although some nuns later returned. The Romanesque convent was largely destroyed by fire in 1936 by anti-clerical anarchist militiamen in the Spanish Civil War. Restoration of the convent began in the 1950s. The Romanesque cloister was restored in 1974. Artworks still in place include the royal tombs of Sancha and Peter of Aragon, while the former abbess's throne was moved to the Leda Museum. In 1985, nuns from the Sisterhood of Bethlehem took over the convent. So I guess just looking here for, this sort of map of Spain, this little red dot here would be where the location of the monastery is generally. So the church contains royal tombs of the House of Aragon. The Romanesque cloister, once in ruins, owes its current appearance to a 1974 reconstruction. Artworks still in place include the royal tombs of Sancha and Peter of Aragon, while the former abbess's throne, we just read that a second ago. The chapter house housed extremely important Romanesque frescoes of about 1200 by largely English artists, probably including some of those who produced the Winchester Bible. This was only realized after their destruction. The artists also appear to have visited Palermo before Siena, as some influence from mosaics there can be seen. The frescoes had been fully photographed in black and white shortly after their destruction, and the remaining damaged sections, mostly having lost their color, were moved to the Museo Nacional d'Art de Catalunya in Barcelona in 1936. The Master of Siena is an early 16th century painter who painted a large altarpiece for the church between 1510 and 1521, panels from which are now exhibited at the Prado Museum in Madrid, the Museum of Santa Cruz in Toledo, and the Museum of Zaragoza. Although the monastery of Siena, the royal pantheon of Aragon, was declared a national monument, later in 1923, much of its art was taken to Catalonia. It began with the stripping of the unique Romanesque paintings, which is the point of contention that was being discussed in the short article prior, from the chapter house during the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. In April 2015 and July 2016, two Spanish courts ruled that MNAC and the Generalitat de Catalunya had to return the murals and 97 works of art and objects stored or exhibited in the MNAC and in the Leda Museum. Even though it was mandatory to comply with the court's rulings, only 51 pieces of the 97 from the monastery have been returned. The mural paintings from the chapter house still remain in the MNAC. A social platform, the SienaSI.com, was created in order to achieve the return of the assets from the monastery of Siena. In December 2017, the Spanish government began removing the remaining artifacts from museums in Catalonia. So I guess these are two images. These are paintings from the chapter house of the monastery of Siena. This is in Barcelona. So they're organized and structured in this space that is meant, at least in part, to try to replicate the original space that it's from. And this is what it looked like in the chapter house in 1914. It was just pretty incredible. I mean, even in grayscale like this, it's it's beautiful. Well, it'll be really interesting to follow any additional developments that happen with these moving pieces. Who knows? Yeah, I think the thing that comes up for me more than anything else is, when does something become too fragile, and is the principle of moving something more important than preserving that object or set of materials or whatever? When does one supersede the other, and vice versa? But yeah, for me, this is an introduction to what's happening with this particular story, and it's kind of interesting just learning about something new. See ya.